Hi guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads. Today I want to talk to you guys about all the books that I read in April. I'm generally super happy with all the books that I read last month, and I have DNF'd one book, which I'm going to start with that, but I'm going to try to keep it as quick as possible because today is over 31 degrees Celsius, so it's so hot and I can't put the fan on here because of the sound, and I don't have an AC, so I'm already sweating actually. I ended DNFing, so not finishing another book this month, which again, I'm trying to be better at that. So it's Calypso by David Sedaris. I've never read anything of this author before. I don't really follow his career. I saw in some YouTubers videos, I think it was Edward Lorne, whose reviews I trust, that he really liked this collection of essays, kind of like memoir style. So I put it on my TBR and I checked it out on Libby as an audiobook, but it really wasn't for me. I think I was 10% into it and I just knew that I'm not gonna have fun with this audiobook. It's nothing in particular, that it's just that I really didn't vibe with the humor at all. So it's a lot of self-deprecating humor. He talks a lot about very dark times in his family and just a lot about his family in general, but I really couldn't connect to it. I believe I listened to the first 2 or 3 essays. There's nothing in there that offended me or something, but it just really wasn't for me. Moving on to a book that I finished for my 2022 Classics Challenge. So I finally read and loved Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It's my first ever Jane Austen book. I have it in this super gorgeous Penguin English Library edition. I don't know why I was surprised, because it is just so well loved and well known. Everybody seems to love the movie with Keira Knightley, which I actually still haven't finished. Not because it's bad, just because I generally don't watch a lot of movies. I'm more of a TV show kind of person. I'm not going to bore you with the premise. I'm just going to tell you how I felt about it. I was just so in awe of how much Jane Austen and her main character, Lizzie Bennet, were so ahead of their time. I find it funny how she was pointing out flaws in our society in such a funny and lighthearted but also satirical way, and relating that back to how some people in our current time still haven't arrived at that conclusion that some norms in our society are completely ridiculous. I'm thinking of what's his name? Is it Mr. Collins? Man, that scene where Mr. Collins is being so thick and ignorant with Lizzie and she's trying to explain to him no means no, I was wowed. I was really in awe. That was such a powerful scene. It was great. I personally liked how ridiculous this was at times and how completely detached it was from anything that was going on in the rest of the world. Loved the sisterly bond between Elizabeth and Jane. Loved how ridiculous their mother was, like many mothers still are, about their daughters being married off. Are all characters super fully fledged out? No. A lot of the sisters, is it Catherine and Mary, were very two-dimensional. Obviously, the way that Lydia was portrayed, you know, didn't quite vibe with that. But then again, was it maybe super intentional? I'm so happy to say that I agree with the masses, and this book is honestly great and stands the test of time. Then I managed to read 3 books for my spring TBR challenge. So the first one is The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This takes place in dystopian California. We focus on Lauren Olamina, who has this kind of psychic-ish ability where she shares feelings with other people. So she can, when she's next to someone who's in great pain, she feels that pain as well. This is about living in total chaos, poverty, hunger in the future, a world full of uncertainty and so many dangers, full of people that are on drugs that set random fires. People are killed and sexually assaulted all the time, and this is about Lauren ultimately trying to find a new and safer home. The aspects that really stood out to me in this book are the aspect of community, not just for emotional purposes but also for survival in this book, and also how religion was handled. I thought that was interesting as well. So Lauren is actually kind of in a way starting her own religion that has to do with community and survival. So the 2 things that I wasn't completely happy with was actually, first of all, her new religion. It's called Earthseed. It wasn't exactly clear to me where it came from. You get an idea of it because of her background, but I think that was a little bit vague. And also her ability, the fact that she is a sharer, where does it come from? What is the purpose of it? I didn't quite see the point of that aspect yet, but I do have a feeling that it's to come. So one of the aspects, or one of the questions this brought up was, if we presume that everybody is a sharer in the world, would everybody just be nicer to each other and not hurt each other? Then I read and loved The Inheritance of Orivia Divina. Oh my goodness, this was such a surprise. So for some reason, I think it's because of the cover, because of the design. It's beautiful, by the way. I assumed this was YA, but it's not. It's adult, which I am so happy about, because I think the adult aspects of this book really brought something to the story. So this is about Orivia Divina. She is a grandma, a family matriarch. She has some kind of magic about her. Nobody is quite sure what it is. And one day she sends out a letter to her family and says she's dying, and they go back to her house, which living there was sometimes problematic, and they find her in the middle of the transformation to becoming a tree. It's a bit crazy, it's a bit lacking of explanation, but it was great. I think I'm giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. So it was not a perfect book, but I was incredibly positively surprised, and it really did grip me. I don't know, it just did all the right things for me, even though I still had a few questions left in the end. As I was saying, I think it's much more fitting that this is an adult book and not YA, because it brought interesting aspects into the story that just made the story a bit more well-rounded, like bigger heartbreaks, pain, and very complicated family relationships that you explore. And I thought also that the sexual aspects in this book also, I don't know, it really fit into the story. I didn't feel like they were there for no reason. Also, part of why I didn't quite give it 5 stars is you have a dual timeline. So there was one perspective that I slightly favored over the other, and in order to be a 5-star book, I think I should have loved both perspectives just the same. This book is for you if you're into magical realism. So that's kind of something I discovered for myself this year, starting with 100 Years of Solitude. Reminds me of The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So if you like that, you should give this a try. And Encanto. So the Disney movie Encanto, I thought there was a lot of similar aspects like between the kids movie and this adult book. And I actually picked this up because it was a Storygraph recommendation, so maybe I should pay more attention to my recommendation column on that app. I'm incredibly happy to report that I read a 5-star book this month, or last month. It's My Life in France by Julia Child. So this is Julia Child's memoir. She is the chef who brought the French cuisine in, I think it was the 60s-ish, to America, to North America. Her big breakthrough cookbook is called Mastering the Art of French Cooking. So this covers the time right after World War II, when she moves to France, to Paris, with her husband Paul Child, because he worked for the government. I only have good things to say about this book. First of all, the relationship between husband and wife, the way it was portrayed, goals. The tone of the book is just so quirky and lighthearted, just written with so much emotion, but at the same time you can read through it so fast. It's the perfect balance between Julia's joie de vivre and her frustrations that she has throughout these years, because it was not always easy. She does come from like a waspy background. Together with her husband working for the government, it's actually interesting how they encounter a lot of important people from the culinary scene in Paris. The descriptions of her life in France are just so incredible, full of flavor, color. Quite frankly, I felt super emotional when I read the last sentence. It felt like I was saying goodbye to a friend. It was honestly very gripping. The way that they describe the process of creating this huge cookbook is insane. The amount of work they or she put into this cookbook, and all the testing, the recipe testing, the writing, it's just incredible. So yes, I definitely want to pick up that cookbook for myself. This is probably going to make it on my favorite of all times book most likely my favorite memoir of all times. And I recommend it to anybody, even if you're not that much into cooking, into French cuisine. This is just so accessible, and I'm sure it will spark a bit of a culinary interest in you. I listened to The Codex by Elizabeth Acevedo. Oh my goodness, this is absolutely amazing, and I would 100% recommend to you guys to listen to it instead of just reading it, because if I'm not mistaken, it is read by the author herself, and she is actually a prize-winning slam poet. So there's just so much gusto and heart in this audiobook. It really makes a huge difference, and especially if you don't really speak Spanish. This is a novel in verse about Xiomara. It's kind of like her coming of age story. It's about growing up, being an immigrant, conflicts with her parents, conflicts with church, conflicts with her parents because of church, friendships, falling in love. It's all there, and it really, really packs a punch. I recommend this to anybody, especially if you're like me and you're usually not really into poetry. This is not pretentious. It doesn't leave you feeling dumb and guessing. Very direct. You will know exactly what is meant. Great experience. 100% recommend the audiobook. Then I listened to Invisible Women, which is a non-fiction book, incredibly interesting, about the gender data gap. Thematizes the male standard, the male default that we have in basically absolutely anything, and how it puts non-males at a disadvantage. Situations where gender neutrality actually turns into gender discrimination. A point that this book makes is gender neutral does not always mean gender equal. This book is very eye-opening. It makes you very mad and concerned. A big caveat though, I know it's kind of to criticize a book for something that it does not mention, but because there's such a focus on male and female, I thought it was missing the group of the population who is not identifying as either male or female. It doesn't feel inclusive enough. Then I read an Agatha Christie, of course. This is The Mysterious of Ferret Styles. This is the very, very first Poirot mystery by Agatha Christie. So it's the first time that you encounter the Belgian detective. I give this 3 out of 5 stars. It's not my favorite out of all the Agatha Christies that I read so far, but it was incredibly insightful to see the beginnings of this character. This is very different from the other Poirot books that I have read. For an instance, this book stretches over a period of 3 months. That is very long. The other books that I've read with Poirot usually stretch over just a few days. One of the reasons why it stretches so long is it includes a courtroom scene, which also for me was a first. It's the first time that I read an actual characterization of Poirot. He's very peculiar, eccentric, proud, basically an arrogant man. Arrogant about his intelligence, which he is, and he himself actually points out his style of only revealing everything in the end, which is kind of a trademark Christie Poirot thing. Also, the first time that I read a story with Hastings, or written from Hastings' point of view, so it was like sidekick essentially. So Hastings is an interesting character, not my favorite so far. He is very jealous, or very envious, that's the right word, of Poirot, while at the same time he definitely puts him on a pedestal. So there's kind of like a love-hate there. There were elements revealed in the very end that were never ever even just implied before, so they really came out of nowhere, which usually in her later Poirot books you get some kind of hint. What happens in this mystery is the very wealthy family matriarch, Emily Inglethorpe, is poisoned at Styles' house. While I didn't love this, I'm so glad that I read this, because this gives me really a better understanding of Poirot's character and where his beginnings were. Lastly, another 4-star book, so yes, I did really have a good reading month, is The Push by Ashley O'Drain. I also listened to this as an audiobook, and man, this book really reminded me of why I like thrillers. So more specifically, this is a domestic thriller, and I flew through this book. I finished it within 2 days, which I can't remember the last time I did that. So this really page-turning psychological drama is about Blythe Connor. She and her husband have a baby girl. Something's wrong. She doesn't feel the motherly connection that she thinks you're supposed to have with her kid. She actually considers the possibility that this girl, this baby, kind of hates her. And she, in a way, starts hating her back. They just really don't seem to get along. It's a very odd situation. Where this book stood out is the exploration of generational trauma. It's kind of the question of nature versus nurture. What is going on with Blythe? What is going on with her relationship to her daughter? Why isn't it developing fully to everybody's expectation? I give it 4 stars. One of the reasons I didn't give that 5th star is you do get a resolution, but it still leaves me with a bunch of questions. And this trope wouldn't be complete without the utterly useless husband, right? I do not wish on anybody to go through life with a partner like that. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. Great reminder of why I read thrillers. That's all the books that I read last month. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and feel free to subscribe if you love watching bookish content. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.